Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey, podcast listeners, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Jeff Peterson, CEO and co-founder of Geneva Supply. Geneva Supply is a multifaceted wholesale distribution company focused on bringing Amazon's strategy and fulfillment solutions to the manufacturing community. Jeff is one of those guys who draws on his relationship-building skills to solve problems in the market space. With Amazon being a superpower in the world of business today, I can see no better place for him to apply his talents. Be warned, I went a little longer on this conversation, but I think it was well worth it. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Another thing I like about this company is they do it all in-house. They take on these applications and build them into the platform using state-of-the-art Microsoft technology. No third-party bolt-ons for them. This is important because when you need technical assistance, they are the single point of contact. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right. Hey, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on Distribution Talk.
It's awesome. Glad to be here.
Right on, man. Well, hey, with Distribution Talk, one of the things we love to do is we like to dive back into the history of, how you got involved with distribution and all the different nuances around that. So please take us back to what you were doing before.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of an interesting story because in distribution, a lot of times, especially in independent distribution, a lot of it is family or you got into it and you kind of grew your way through it. Mine was a completely different path. I actually started right out of college. I started in the liquor industry because I grew up in the liquor industry. My dad was the president of 3 liquor distributorships in Illinois. So my summer jobs were picking different orders for different bars and restaurants and orders for liquor stores around the area and unloading semis full of Jim Beam and all the rest of it. So, so I thought that was where I was going to end up. I was going to end up working for one of the distilleries, et cetera. So out of school, by the time I finished up school and I had all those summers, I had been working with different brands like Seagram's and Jim Beam and Smirnoff and Bacardi. So I actually thought I was going to end up working for Seagram's because, some of our family friends were, president of Seagram's and all that kind of stuff. That's who we vacationed with. But I ended up going to work for Jim Beam. So I worked for Jim Beam. I moved from Illinois right out to Minneapolis, and I started doing kind of the basics of what I would call marketing and building displays and stocking shelves and flow charts and all that kind of stuff on how the store works. So I was kind of on that other end of distribution. I was in that distribution retail side of things. That's where I kind of started. It's funny because I worked for Jim Beam for about 5 years. And then they kept wanting to move me up. I was kind of on the fast track because my dad at that point ended up being a vice president of Jim Beam. So I'm not going to lie. I got my job at Jim Beam because of my dad. And I always tell people, I'm like, it is cool to get a job no matter how you got the job. So, so take advantage of your connections and go for it. But from there, I ended up basically working for a liquor distributorship in Wisconsin because I didn't want to keep on moving and moving and moving. So that was the best route for me. So I ended up settling in Wisconsin, working for a liquor distributorship as a district sales manager. I had about 35 liquor salesmen that were underneath me. So at that time, I'm like 25 years old. And if you know anything about the liquor distribution business and liquor salespeople, very similar to the tool side, these people that are working and out there selling are not 23 years old. Some of them have been doing it forever. So I was like managing people that were 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And I'm this like 25-year-old kid, you know, and the only reason that I was really in a position to do it and felt comfortable with it is because of all the positions that my dad would put me into in front of people and make me kind of just, find my way through it. And I got comfortable working with people and managing people and just kind of being there for them. I was really good at riding along and bringing value on those ride-alongs. So that's kind of where I got my taste of it. But what ended up happening from there is I actually went and I bought a sports bar. I always wanted to own a sports bar. And being in that liquor distribution world, I got tied in and I had an opportunity. So I took it. So that was the way I got into kind of owning my own business and managing it and running it. And then at that point, 6.5, 7 years into that, I ended up selling the bar and had to basically look at myself and say, okay, all right, Peterson, what are you going to do now that you've got to grow up? Because right up to that, being in the liquor industry, it's always kind of like active and stuff's going on. And it's what everybody wants to ask you about because you're the life of the party because you're part of what they're drinking at the party.
Right.
So it was one of those things where I had to really figure out what I wanted to do. But that's how I ended up getting into the tool distribution world, as crazy as that seems. Because one of the guys that I knew, I was helping manage his band, and he was the Greenlee Textron rep for the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
So he goes, dude, I know exactly what you should do. And I'm like, oh yeah, what's that? He goes,
bring it up. Bring it.
You should be a salesperson for one of these distributors that I call on. And I'm like, a salesperson for what? He goes, for tools. And I'm like, dude, I don't own a tool. I'm the guy that buys beer and pizza for somebody to hang a picture on my wall. I don't know tools. I have no product knowledge. I don't really, I really don't even, I have no desire to go out there and work that hard. So I'm like, I don't know what you even mean. So I needed a job. So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll go interview. So I went and interviewed with them and they offered me this job. And it came down to, I was in a pickup truck and I'm out there selling tools and I get this territory in all these accounts and I just go out and start selling. And so at that point, it was just me figuring out how to even call on contractors and different levels of buyers and how to build those relationships. And as you can kind of tell, I talk a lot. So the relationship building part was the easiest part. So I tried to figure out how to just play off of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, there at the time, there was not a lot of educational resources for you. I mean, it's basically, you just go look. I mean, you go figure this out yourself.
Completely, because I'm going to be 52 here. So back then when I was doing this, it was very much the same as that old school vibe of you've got a tool in your hand, you go show them the newest tool and try to find out if they have a need for it. And then while you're talking about that new shiny penny type of a concept, you say, hey, you need any hole saws? Hey, you need any dodgeball blades? So you're using that lead in to get your foot in the door to get their time and then working through it. And within 6 months, I ended up being the number 2 outside salesperson for the company. And I think the reason is because I went in there and I was asking a ton of questions. And when they asked me questions, I was honest with them when I didn't have the answer. And most of the questions they had, I didn't have answers to because I was so new in the industry, but I got back to them and I followed up and I did what I said I was going to do. And that's really, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. That's the key. It's like, if somebody has a question for you, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room in that moment, but you've got to be the smartest person knowing that they need an answer and you're going to get it for them and find that connection to that.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, you and I, years ago, we taught that manufacturer's rep class, and that was one of the big things that we shared with these guys is, hey, if you can just follow up and do what you say you're going to do, you're going to be a rock star out there.
That's what it was.
It just shocks me, absolutely shocks me that simple fundamental of, hey, even if you don't know the answer, just follow up quickly and people are going to love you.
Exactly.
They're going to cut you slack that you don't know something. It's just, don't drop the ball.
I was definitely the butt of a lot of jokes because they'd get to know me and they'd be like, why are you selling tools to me? Because I'd be honest, I'd be like, dude, I have no idea what this tool is. And it's funny. When I bought my bar, I had never bartended a day in my life. So it was that same concept I used when I was selling tools. I'd show them this new tool and then I'd say, what the heck would you use this for? I'm like, they're telling me that this is what you should use it for, but what would you really use it for? And how many would every person on your crew need one of these? I'd be asking questions that I should have been like telling them, but they were so into giving me those answers and saying, not every truck would have one, but you know what? We should have like 4 or 5 of them in the shop so that when they have those projects, it's available to them. So I'd start kind of getting that back knowledge, and all of a sudden I'm drawing that out. Because when I bought my sports bar, the very first day I opened, guy walks in and I'm bartending and I'm by myself. And he goes, "I'll have a brandy old fashioned sweet." And I'm like, brandy old fashioned sweet. All right. So I grabbed a glass. I went over to the tap handle and I pulled a Miller Lite, boom, and I put it in front of him. And he goes, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I ordered a brandy old fashioned sweet. And I said, "Yep." He goes, "You gave me a Miller Lite tap." And I'm like, "Yep." And he goes, "That makes no sense to me." And I'm like, "Actually, I gave it because I know that's going to taste like Miller Lite. And if I was to make you a brandy old fashioned sweet, I have no idea what it would taste like because I have no idea how to make it." And I said, "Make it a deal. Come back behind the bar, teach me how to make that, and teach me how to make every other drink you know how to make, and you drink for free today." And he's like, "Sure." So it was that same concept of going there with a tool that I didn't know the functionality exactly how it worked, and drawing them in to wanting to care about teaching me as much about that tool as teaching them about, hey, this is something I think you should use because somebody told me you should, and let's see if there's a match here. And I think that openness, that authenticity of realizing that you don't know everything and you want to learn more about them than you just forcing it down their throat for a sale.
I mean, absolutely. There's this desire to know everything, and not to look vulnerable in these situations. Yep. But the more you are, the more you're going to learn. Exactly. And frankly, these customers are really interested in helping you. They like to show off what they know.
Yes.
Let's give them the opportunity to show off.
I agree. I totally agree. And honestly, I've always been a person that respected and loved people that worked with their hands and went out there and earned their living every single day and did that. I was just not that person, but I was so intrigued by what they did and how they did it and how that functions and what their projects looked like and what stage of the project they were in. I was so intrigued. I love going to manufacturing facilities. I love to see all of that stuff being built and how it works. I've just never been a person that is the person that's the hands-on of it, but I'm really intrigued by that stuff.
Sure. No, it's fascinating. I think going through a manufacturing facility, I mean, after about the 16th one, you kind of get a little tired of it, but oh my God, though, they are really enthused about it. And, I'm okay with that. I think I'm more intrigued sometimes by the people who are showing me this because they are so passionate about whatever this little tool is, or this machine, the CNC machine that does this or whatever. I remember going to Sweden, doing that Husqvarna, tour, and oh my God, those guys were passionate about that. I mean, it was crazy.
And they do the same thing all day, every single day.
Yeah.
And when they get a chance to share it, I mean, you could see it in their eyes. I was just at a manufacturer, Precision Plus, here in Wisconsin on a manufacturing day. I was bringing a bunch of my biz tank students for career exploration, and he was doing a show and tell, the owner of the company, Mike Reeder, and I walked in there, and these guys that were on each of those machines, they were so into it and so interested in sharing what they did for a living. I just started to kind of self-assess, and I'm like, am I this passionate every day about what I'm doing? Because these guys have like this magic pixie dust of what drives them every single day, because they're making something that they know is going to do something else and go into a different machine, a different this, and it's going to do that. That's what drives them every single day to the quality of what they're out there producing. It's unbelievable.
It is absolutely amazing. So fast forward, you spent some time in the tool industry. Then what happened?
It was kind of strange. So I worked for a family-owned tool distributorship. Yeah. And there was a local wholesaler. So a lot of people use distribution and the term wholesale in the same way. I don't. I use wholesale as more of a B2B and distribution as more of a B2C. That's the way I've kind of separated in my head. There was a local wholesaler, small company that was going to be shutting their doors. And I went to the owners of the company. I said, hey, listen, instead of having that local wholesaler that we actually buy from upon occasion, why don't we look at diversifying our portfolio as a company and go and buy that wholesaler, because that'll branch us out to be a value outside of just southeastern Wisconsin. And it will give us a different look. It was very much that direction that ORS NASCO was going. And I wanted to go out and explore that opportunity and see what that was all about. So I negotiated the purchase of that company all the way down to the end, and they finally gave the approval to say, yeah, let's do this. Because it was funny. They said, well, I think we could spend our money better a different way. And I said, I just want to be honest with you. I've put all this time into this, and I believe in it. So here's the deal. Either you guys are buying this company, or I'm buying this company and I'm leaving your company. So because you allowed me to negotiate this to the very end, I'm giving you first right of refusal because that's what this is all about. But if you say no, I'm not letting this opportunity go because you said no. I'm going to actually find a way to buy that company if you guys say no. So literally within 20 minutes, they said, well, I think maybe we'll do that then.
Okay.
So that's what happened. So I ended up hiring a person to run the day-to-day operations, which ended up now is my current business partner at Geneva Supply.
Okay. I got you now.
So he was actually a rep that called on me at Jensen Equipment. So I got to know him. And one thing my dad always said is your greatest strength is knowing your weaknesses, and surround yourself with people that offset those weaknesses.
Sure.
And I sucked so bad at computer systems and operations and all that technology aspect. I was the negotiator. I was the people person. I was the way to figure out how to grow sales and how to connect with people and build those relationships. I wasn't the computer operations system guy. And I still to this day am not. And it's not because I don't think I could figure it out. It's because I never wanted to figure it out.
And you don't need to. I mean, that's the thing. You surround yourself with great people who understand it. All you have to do is, inspire them to be great at that.
Yes, that's really the way this kind of played out. So I hired him and I split my time half and half. So I was spending half of it overseeing the distribution part of it as Jensen Equipment and overseeing the wholesale operation, which was Builders World that we had just purchased. So the crazy thing is me and Mark Becker, my current business partner, was running that. And I literally had lunch with him every single day. Every day for years, we were having lunch together, talking about business, talking about how things were going to grow. We grew that wholesale business to a pretty hefty amount of business because we got a call one day from a person that connected us to the senior vendor manager at Amazon.com. Mm-hmm. And what happened is back in the day, Amazon was pretty taboo because there was a lot of manufacturers that were saying, we don't want our products sold on Amazon.
Right.
Tons of brick and mortar retailers, whether it was independent distribution or it was like the big box stores that were saying, if you sell to Amazon, we're going to get your product off of our shelves, really trying to leverage those past relationships because they didn't know what this Amazon thing was going to be. And they were,
it was fear. Yeah, it was fear. It's all fear-based strategy, fear-based marketing. Yeah.
100%. And so what ended up happening is we looked at each other and said, let's check this out. So Black & Decker was up for sale back then. Yeah. So they actually killed their relationship with Amazon while they were up for sale. So 3 of the major power tool lines that were part of Amazon's tool business was DeWalt, Porter Cable, and Delta. And those were the 3 brands that were really driving a lot of that Amazon business in those beginning years. And Black & Decker was direct, and they killed that relationship. So we actually got a phone call and said, hey, you guys are a wholesaler for DeWalt, Porter Cable, and Delta. Do you think you could bridge this gap for us and sell us products close to what we were actually paying for it? And we're like, well, let's take a look. And we were able to do it. So we actually started doing business with Amazon.com back then, just from a random connection that knew we were a wholesaler and knew we had wholesale agreements with those brands and knew the senior vendor manager at Amazon. So that's how we started doing business. Then all of a sudden, we start getting these massive orders and the business started to grow. And Amazon came to us and said, you guys are killing this. Can you also get us this brand? Can you also get us that brand? And this brand really wants to do business with us, but they can't figure it out because of our systems, and their system won't communicate with ours, and it's all this kind of stuff. So we started doing business with manufacturers for all kinds of different reasons. Some of it was because they didn't want their traditional brick and mortar retail business to know they were doing business with Amazon. But they knew it was important to their future, but they just didn't want to risk it. So we were involved with those situations. Others were manufacturers that were like, we want to sell on Amazon. We want to do that, but we can't figure it out. Will you help us? So that's what we started doing. So the business started to grow dramatically in about 18 months, to the point where me and Becker looked at each other at lunch one day and we said, this is a family-owned business. We're not family. Are we elevating this to a point where we're in trouble? We actually went to them and said, hey, listen, we're kind of running this day-to-day operation, kind of building this business. How about we work something out where we get a percentage of it? And that's cool. And the answer was, actually, our dad always told us not to do business with anybody that's not family. So we're like, oh yeah, no, totally get it, because we wanted to keep our jobs. Oh yeah, no, makes perfect sense. And then the next lunch was that day. So we actually go to lunch and we're like,
yeah, we're in trouble.
Yeah, oh no, we're actually working ourselves potentially out of a job because we're not family. So at that point, we went out and found 4 investors that could help us try to go to them and try to buy Builders World. So that's what we did. So we walked in a couple weeks later and said, hey, listen, we get it. You don't want to do the percentage thing. Your dad, in a lot of ways, is probably right. It's difficult to do business and have various partners. So would you consider selling us to Builders World? And that way we could do it. And they came to an agreement that made sense. 6 months of negotiating to come up with what that looked like. I always say the midnight hour, if you've ever heard the term in the midnight hour, it was 8 p.m. on a Monday night. We were supposed to close on the business the next morning at 8 a.m. And we were in a conference room, video conferencing in with them. And they said, hey, listen, we need to change the way the purchasing agreement looked. So we're going to have to change it. And our investors basically said, no, we don't agree with what you want to change it to. And they're like, well, that's the way it's going to have to be if we're going to close tomorrow. And our investors said, no. So it's funny. I look over at Becker. Becker looks at me and we're like, wait a second. Let's just do this, guys. Let's own this thing tomorrow. Why are you screwing with it? Come on. Let's all hands in the middle here. Let's go.
Yeah. Let's go.
And they said no. So literally me and Becker walk in to work the next day thinking that we were going to own the company that next day, but we walked in and got fired.
Oh no.
So then it was, oh no, what now? So we literally, I remember I had a company car, so I had to jump in Becker's car. We drive into a Kohl's parking lot and we're just like, all right, what now? And I said, well, let's get, the investors on the phone. And we're talking to them. They're like, well, what are you going to do? I can't believe they fired you. All this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, we don't get it either, but whatever, it happened. And they're like, what do you want to do? And I remember to this day, I said, well, let's start it from scratch. We did it once, we can do it again.
Sure.
And it was pretty crazy because there was about 8 employees at that company. And all of them started reaching out and saying, hey, I thought you guys were going to own the company. What's going on with this? And we're like, yeah, we're not. And they're like, what's going on? What are you guys going to do? And we're like, well, we're going to start this company from scratch. And they're like, well, you need employees, right? And we're like, well, yeah, but we don't even have
we don't have any money, but
we don't have business yet. We don't have cash flow. 7 out of the 8 of those employees, literally, I call it the Jerry Maguire moment. Who's coming with me? But I didn't say who's coming with me. They just said, we're coming with you.
Right.
So 7 out of the 8 people just said, we believe in you guys. We saw the magic that was happening that we created as a team, and we want to go make that magic happen. And that's how things got started. So that night, we went to Best Buy and bought laptops, Sprint and got cell phones. And later that night, me and Becker came up with the name Geneva Supply. And we started in a 10,000 square foot airplane hangar in Burlington, Wisconsin, because one of our investors was a private jet broker. So he had this open space, and he's like, well, I mean, you can run it out of the airplane hangar. And we're like, I don't know what we have. So that's how it got started. And we just started calling manufacturers and starting the thing from scratch and going for it.
And if I recall correctly, it wasn't just power tools and stuff. You were like anybody. If I remember, there was golf stuff that you got involved with.
It was crazy. So at that point, Amazon, the way that Amazon worked is they had vendor managers that would be in a job for about 18 months. They would get transferred to a completely different category. So Amazon didn't want people to build relationships that, people could start to have leveraging with and that kind of thing. They moved them on. So I would start to get calls from vendor managers I was doing business with in tools. And I'd get an email that said, hey, Jeff, I'm in sporting goods. I've got a whole bunch of brands that we need help with. Could you possibly go out and talk to these manufacturers just like you did for me in tools and start convincing them and having them understand, because they can't or don't want to do business direct with us. So we started getting into sporting goods. We handled Nike Golf. And it was funny, the way that we ended up having to handle Nike Golf is we actually had to put a putting green and a driving net inside the company because they had to have a retail presence. And that was the requirements of being set up with Nike Golf. So
Oh, that's funny.
so it was fantastic. We had this little retail area that people could literally come in and buy Nike Golf products, and we had a separate entrance and everything built out. We had a putting green to try putters, driving net to try irons and drivers. And I mean, my golf game was never better.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's tons of fun. So to your point, to us, when it came to the e-commerce world, it was just an item. It was just a price point. It was just, how are we going to get it from the manufacturer to the Amazon platform? And we got really, really, really good at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. That's one of the things I've always coached distributors on is don't get too married to your industry. This is stuff. And you are in the distribution business. You're not in the tool business. You're in the distribution business. And I remember having a conversation with a third generation guy. We were at an airport and I said, hey, just because you have concrete products on your shelf today, don't be married to that. It can be anything. Learn to be a distributor. Don't necessarily learn to be in the concrete business.
100% agree. I think that goes back to when I was out there selling, whether it was in the liquor industry or whether it was in the tool industry, asking those questions and then listening to their answers, which in a lot of times their answers had their needs built in to their answers. So when you start to realize what their needs are, that's when you start to look at what those consistencies are in those opportunities. You can't chase every single need, but when there's a consistency from one contractor or one customer to the other, that becomes an opportunity. And if there's a trust that you have built, that opportunity turns into profitability.
Yeah, it's fascinating though, thinking about all these different categories now that you've been pulled into. Again, it's just a thing on the shelf, and
right now,
how do I move it from A to B?
You know me, I don't have a lick of hair on my head, but we're handling huge hair care products that we handle now because for Amazon, for things to be able to go through their system, the product has to be bagged. Some of the retail price points are too low, so they have to be two-packed or kitted just to bring the retails up so the freight starts to make sense. We have shampoos and conditioners that we package together so that the consumer can find it and easily shop the same way that if they walked into a brick and mortar retailer, they grab a shampoo, they grab a conditioner. So we're finding ways to think about the customer first, and that the way the customer wants to buy product or the way they look at product and make a purchasing decision. That's more of what we're doing. It's kind of funny. One of the vendors that we just had a meeting with said, Jeff, I know you do a lot of logistics and a lot of operations. He goes, but honestly, I was just telling our team this morning when I was kind of explaining who you guys are, I told them Geneva Supply is actually a marketing company that does logistics. And I never found a way to make that concise statement about what it is. But really, I think so many distributors are truly sales, marketing, and the distribution aspect is just how they're getting what they sold to somebody. So when you start to realize how important marketing your company, marketing your people, and starting to figure out how to connect, that's so much of the front line. And I think so much of that gets forgotten.
I agree. Absolutely. I mean, and again, I think that they really need to understand whose brand is most important. I mean, so many times distributors they tend to piggyback onto the brand of whoever they are selling that day and forget that they are the brand. That they have to drive their brand. Absolutely. That is the relationship out there. Or unfortunately, you get into a position where the tail starts wagging the dog and you get, ripped around by all these manufacturers.
I think there's that partnership of being great at what you do, as well as doing justice to the brand that you're doing it with. That's key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've been doing this now 10 years. You just celebrated your 10th anniversary, you and Mark. Tell me, so what's changed in a brief nutshell?
I'll tell you what. Number one, thank you for the little congratulations on the 10 years. I had no idea that a 10-year anniversary was going to matter, because honestly, as you're doing it every single year, you're just trying to stay in business. So you're not really counting the days, the months, the years until you start to turn a corner. And the funny thing is, I always say we were a startup for 8 years.
Yeah. Wow.
And it literally felt that way because everything that we were making, we were putting back into the infrastructure of the company. So until 2 years ago, I didn't even realize how long we've been in business because you're just going through that grind and trying to build the infrastructure and surround yourself with great people and try to drive profit. So a couple of years ago is when I started to realize it. And now I am so energized by going around and seeing other companies that have lasted 10 years because I know everything that went into what we had to do, starting from an airplane hangar to now having 185,000 square foot warehouse and office facility where our corporate headquarters are in Delavan, Wisconsin. We have a 60,000 square foot logistics facility in Charleston, South Carolina. And we just opened a few months ago another 60,000 square feet facility in Phoenix, Arizona. And all of that just kind of started to be logical in the way we were growing and just that path of what the e-commerce world is kind of demanding. That 2 days to the doorstep of the consumer that Amazon created, that's starting to be a challenge for manufacturers because Amazon's starting to want to watch their inventory levels more and more. And that direct relationship to Amazon is starting to get different. They're setting up less and less manufacturers on a direct relationship and starting to make more and more manufacturers sell on their third-party seller platform, their Seller Central platform, which means in so many cases, that means that seller has to ship direct to the consumer. And so many manufacturers that aren't hitting enough volume or are having a struggle in having Amazon work with them, they don't really logistically want to ship direct to consumers. So that's where we started to get more and more into having third-party logistics be a big part of what we did and started opening on the coasts so that we could start bringing containers in for those manufacturers. And we start handling them, not just for Amazon, but the entire e-commerce, the whole .com platform, Walmart.com, Target.com, HomeDepot.com, Lowe's.com, so that we can ship direct to consumers for them, but we can also ship to their brick and mortar retailers. If it's more logical for freight purposes for us to ship to a traditional distributor or a brick and mortar retailer, we can do that, but we can also handle their e-commerce platform. And that was us listening to the needs of manufacturers and what their challenges were, but also seeing the direction that Amazon was driving the e-commerce world to.
No, that's fantastic. I noticed that you've actually got plans to open several more distribution centers. I mean, I saw 4 different ones, one actually in Germany.
So we've been asked, the Germany one's kind of unique because that's coming more from the manufacturers that are very challenged with getting product from the US into the European market on Amazon.com. And they were looking for us because we had the experience with Amazon in the US to just handle and manage their business in Europe. So that's where the whole Germany location is coming from. We're looking at opening a location in Allenton, Pennsylvania, Seattle, Washington, and then we're going to decide, we've got a couple of options, Denver, Colorado, or actually Dallas. So there's a purpose right now with a couple of our manufacturers to head down towards Texas versus handling Denver. But we've got to be as close to the largest percentage of population. And also you take that UPS and FedEx map and figure out, okay, where can you hit in that 2 days so that every single .com that's chasing that, you can be a logistics partner to them.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've got a client who, he studies that map quite often when he's looking at, where he's going to drop a location into. So we have a lot of talks about that. Well, that's fantastic. And so, I'm looking at the time going, oh my God, we've been rolling here pretty good. So tell me, where are you taking this thing? I mean, where do you see, I see there's a lot of consulting going on as well. I mean, that's kind of a big piece of what you do now.
Yeah, kind of going back to, I think, why that manufacturer said we're a marketing agency that does logistics, kind of lends it to what we've been up to because we do e-commerce strategy, Amazon strategy. So we'll actually take a manufacturer and say, come on in and let's talk about what your goals are, what your fears are, what your strengths are, and what you want to do. And we'll help them decide and determine what's their best path. Should they even go on Amazon.com? Does it make sense for them to do that? If so, should it be on the Seller Central platform or the Vendor Central platform, et cetera? So we actually also, with Amazon opening up their marketing, their digital marketing side of life a few years ago, we have an entire digital marketing team in-house. We have a brand management team in-house that's headed up by a guy that left Amazon. He was there for 12 years at the director level. John Pistone is now he's the first vendor manager that we met for tools for that whole Black & Decker Dwellport Cable Delta. He actually works for Geneva Supply now. So we're opening that whole rep division aspect of what's going on, just because we have all of the infrastructure that a manufacturer can go in and grow into Geneva Supply. And I always say manufacturers are going to be able to grow into everything that we do, but our goal and our plan, the way we're kind of doing it, is they're never really going to grow out of Geneva Supply.
It's great that you don't have this kind of, all right, what else can you do for me? Deal. Right. And I mean, you all have so many interesting things going on here. So if you could, encapsulate some advice for someone wanting to get involved with either starting their own distribution company or running or managing their distribution company just a little bit stronger today, what should they be looking at?
The big thing is, if you're looking to be box in, box out, if you want to get involved in the e-commerce world, you've got to look at it different. It's not just box in, box out. There's a lot of compliance that goes into it. A lot of operating systems and warehouse management systems aren't set up to handle some of that workload. So first, I would say check your systems to see how complicated it would be to actually be able to adapt to all the different compliance regulations and the way things need to be handled in the e-commerce platform for the different .coms that are out there before you get yourself too involved chasing that business. Your systems have to be able to handle it. We put a tremendous amount of money into getting our systems up to speed. And when we weren't doing it that way, to grow business was very painful, and it bottlenecked all of our business. So you've got to just know what your capabilities are with your systems first. But then I think going back to knowing what your position and knowing what your role is and not being able to just be squeezed out, you've got to create a difference, and you've got to create a long-term value for a manufacturer as the partnership in that marketplace. I think there's a lot of people out there right now that are just chasing, I can make 50 cents on this and they sell 10,000 a month, so I'm going to make good money on that. And they're just chasing those one-offs. And I would warn everybody that is going to be gone sooner than later with a lot of the ways that the e-commerce platform is going, and it's so competitive. It's the Wild West. And how much do you want to invest time and money into something that can just be pulled out from underneath you? I would say if you're going to get into it, look at the longevity of what your role is and what the niche is that you can create a value in that partnership with your manufacturer before you just start chasing the 50-cent dollar per item volume game, because that can get pulled out from underneath you. And then what's your next trick? What's that next, item that's going to get you back to it? Because that's a huge stress load. It's just not necessary.
Gotcha. Well, hey man, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, my friend.
I appreciate it. Let's chat soon.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.